welcome everybody to the Machine Metrics State of the Industry, the impact of COVID-19 on manufacturing. We are really grateful to have you all here today. And we're excited. We've got a really great crew back with us to get started, as well as my cat, which is, who is never not here. Can one of my co-presenters give me a thumbs up that they can see my screen? Lovely. So just to get things started, the current state of manufacturing has really caused some widespread concern and economic hardship for consumers, businesses, and communities across the world. The situation is fast moving and it does have widespread impact. One thing is for certain, which is that it has and will continue to have global economic and financial ramifications that will be felt throughout the manufacturing industry. How has COVID affected the near-term global manufacturing supply chain today? How will it be affected moving forward? How do we reshape and rebuild an industry to be more sustainable, more resilient, and anti-fragile for the future? Our philosophies that in times like these, it's never been more important to harness the power of data to inform us of what's happening, and more importantly, what we can do to help protect the lives and livelihoods of the communities and the industries around the world. So in our fifth, which is kind of amazing, State of the Industry panel, we'll be exploring these issues using a variety of unique data sets to illustrate the impact of the pandemic and our current economic situation on the manufacturing industry. Despite what the inherent monetary value of the data that companies like Machine Metrics collect, we believe that as an organization, we have both the opportunity, the duty to democratize our uniquely insightful data to empower informed decisions that may shape the future of our manufacturing community. So with that said, and for those of you who've already been with us before, you know me, I'm your host and moderator, Graham Immerman, VP of Marketing here at Machine Metrics. But we have three much cooler and more insightful people than myself joining us yet again. Chad Moutre, who's Chief Economist of National Association of Manufacturers, NAM. Give him a wave, Chad. We also have Lou Zhang, our Chief Data Scientist here at Machine Metrics. Say hey, Lou. And Jerry Foster, the Chief Technology Officer at Plex. Thanks for joining us again, Jerry. So, per usual, just going to go through a quick agenda and go through a couple items. We're going to have an introduction followed by some specific company presentations around the live data. And then we will have a live discussion Q&A and tell you what's coming up next on our webinar series. Just a couple notes for everyone who I'm sure will ask. This webinar is being recorded. We will send out a link after the webinar to everybody who signed up or even who attended. Questions are very much welcome. So in the navigation of the Zoom, there is a Q&A section to ask a question anytime. You're also welcome to chat with each other using the chat functionality. But if you want to have a question that our panel answers, please use that Q&A section. It helps us keep things organized, and we usually get a whole lot of them. So that would be great. Last but not least, we are holding a webinar next month with Modern Machine Shop, and by next month I mean next week, in our webinar series called Supercharging Predictive Maintenance with High Frequency Machine Data. That's going to also be driven by my good friend Lou on September 2nd from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. I do hope you sign up for that. We're going to be talking about how to accelerate predictive maintenance use cases on the factory floor with something that our team has uniquely discovered to allow the enabling of a number of those use cases. So I think it'll be really interesting and exciting, and we're getting a lot of there's a lot of excitement around it. We are still running our COVID-19 response program for manufacturers that are in the process of production of ventilators or other medical device related components related to the treatment of COVID. please reach out to us or check out our website that we have dedicated to the efforts to support these manufacturers. And just a quick rundown for those of you that do not know who we are. Machine Metrics is manufacturing's industrial IoT platform for machines. Machine Metrics is really accelerating industrial digital transformation. We provide an intuitive and flexible platform to easily collect data and transform that data from any piece of manufacturing equipment into powerful, actionable apps that reduce machine downtime, optimize capacity, and drive increased throughput and profitability for factories. Right now, we do have hundreds of manufacturers that have connected thousands of machines to our platform across global factories. And our platform is enabling these companies to harness the power of their machine data to drive immediate actionability through real-time visibility into production, historical reporting and bottleneck identification, predictive tooling and maintenance apps, customizable rules-based workflows for any shop floor data item, and text and email notifications that deliver optimized processes to factory workers. You can also build your own apps or seamlessly connect with your current shop floor systems to integrate that machine data across your digital factory. With Machine Metrics, manufacturers can now expedite their time to value for Industry 4.0 implementations. So you can put your data to work immediately and provide a foundation for scaling that data across your organization while prioritizing your resources towards what you do best, which is make stuff. Okay, that's it from me. Now is the time where I'm going to hand things over to Lou. And Lou is going to start off with our first presentation. Lou, do you want to take over the screen share?
Absolutely. So let me go ahead and share. I think you might have to stop.
You know what? I think you're right.
All right, thank you. So thank you for the introduction, Graham. By now, a lot of you know me. This is our, I think, third or fourth webinar in the series, and we're really excited to really continue to present novel information for the industry. I never want to repeat stuff from before, and there's been plenty that's happened since the last time we presented. So first of all, the most exciting thing is that we've actually been getting a lot of interest from consulting organizations, companies, even federal government about our data. And a lot of questions have arisen around, how we actually get our data. I get a lot of questions like, well, how do you actually update your data set when new machines come in? And at first I was a little taken aback by these questions, but then I realized, if you don't have that manufacturing and that technology background, these things may not be obvious. So I just want to take a little bit of time to do a bit of due diligence and let you guys know how exactly we get all this data into our databases and analyze it. So first of all, this is a machine shop somewhere in the US, and as you can see, there's separate machines and there's an operator at each machine. The only time the shop floor manager usually knows when they're behind on parts is when that operator tells them that they're behind. It could be at the end of the day, it could be at the end of the week, it could be at the end of the shift. But oftentimes what we saw is that it's too little too late. And by then, when you're off by 500, 1,000 parts or something like that, and the operator thinks that he could catch up, and that's not the case, then you got to talk to your customer about that, or you got to run extra shifts, or you have to put the machines in feed rate overdrive. So this is not ideal, but this is how manufacturing has been done for the past couple of decades. So what we do is we go into the control cabinet of each of these machines. This is what it looks like. And we have two devices, an I/O device here and an edge device. So where the magic happens is really in this edge device right here. It is a preloaded Windows or Linux IoT computer that comes with all sorts of adapters that talk to the APIs that these individual control manufacturers have. So this is where a lot of our intellectual property lies. It's in the fact that we can clean this data before the customer even has to touch it. The customer can basically self-install this stuff, but the complex stuff and the nitty-gritty is really embedded in that edge device, and that's where our contribution really is. If you have an older machine, and it doesn't have nice controls like this, we can also come in with something called a current transducer and just wrap around the spindle power. Basically, when the spindle's drawing power, we know that machine is being utilized and it's on, and when it's not drawing power, it's not on. It's a bit more complex than that, but I'll try not to belabor the point too much here. So what's the customer get from this? Well, basically, factory floor manager, operators, anybody, executives can see exactly what's happening on every single machine at all times. You can see if it's on or off, if it's in setup, if it's idle, how many parts it's made during the shift, if it's behind or ahead your parts goal. And what our customers do is they often choose to display this on a big screen TV on their factory floor. But you could really access this anywhere from your iPad, from your phone at home. You can basically get a very nice visibility on your factory's operations at all times. We also have this thing called an operator tablet. So at every single one of our machines, we have not just automated input from the control and the edge device, we also allow customers to add contextual information via the operator dashboard, which basically lets them say, well, why did the machine go down? Were parts rejected, were parts scrapped, things like that. So what it all results in, and you analysts or data scientists might be familiar with this, the very large tabular data format. So for every single hour on every single one of our machines, we know obviously when that hour started and when it ended, but we also know how many in-cycle milliseconds there are. So this is what we use to compute utilization. This is when either the power is being drawn to the spindle or a G-code program is running. We also know how many milliseconds the spindle is rotating. So of the time that the G-code program is running, how many milliseconds was the spindle actually, rotating and doing work? We also know the cutting milliseconds. Of that, what subset of that is the spindle actually contacting metal and doing work? So this is all automatic. And obviously we know the number of parts produced as well because we have a nice part counter on the control. So this is all automatic. This doesn't require any input from us or any of the operators. Manually, operators can also choose to select parts that they've rejected, parts that they've scrapped, and parts that are non-conforming to standards. So we also have that sort of contextual information around how successful these runs are. And obviously, you see here we have about 66, 70 million machining hours of data at this point. So what's this result in? We've been doing this for 5 years now. The past 3 years is what I consider statistically significant data. Over this time, each one of these dots is one of our customers, and the size of each dot is how many machines they have. But we've tracked billions of parts manufactured, billions of dollars of equipment monitored. And some of you might be wondering, what is this big circle right here in the middle of the Nevada desert? Well, in fact, Area 51 is one of our customers, believe it or not. So why don't you think about that for a sec? So what does this result in? So we can see the past 3 years of utilization. This is what we've been posting on LinkedIn every day. And basically, this year in 2020, what we see, in addition to what we've already posted about, is we really see 4 regimes happening. We see, you can also see like little holidays and things like that, but I'm not going to go over that this time around. You can see a 7% increase in utilization from January to mid-March before the pandemic. You can see a 16% decrease in utilization from mid-March to mid-April, which is when this thing really hits and things are shutting down. You can see a gradual 8% increase back up from mid-April to mid-June. And the current regime we're in right now is slight, 2% decrease, 0%, something like that. Basically, what it means is we're kind of in a wait and see mode right now. And I'll talk a bit about that in a bit more detail in a sec. So one of the biggest requests that we have is, what is our industry distribution of customers? So we actually reached out to our friends at AMT, the Association for Manufacturing Technology, which we're members of. They do machine tool research and research requests. We actually gave them our list of customers and we were like, can you help us categorize these? And the answer was yes. They consulted all sorts of databases like NICS codes and Dun & Bradstreet and, things like LexisNexis. And they really did a good job giving us a nice, accurate company distribution. So as you can see, these are some of our customers, but we're slightly underrepresented in automotive. I think automotive is somewhere around 20 or 25% of manufacturing, and we're slightly overrepresented in medical devices and equipment. So just putting that out front, if any of you economists or analysts are doing some very specific analysis with this and you're inputting this into models, you can reweight our utilization with our raw data if you so choose. So let's get to the good stuff. So we track by every single one of these industries what utilization is. You can see this is kind of messy, 5 lines is not great on one graph. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go with the smooth fit. So this is something called a lowest fit. For you economists out there, we use a span of 0.75 for this fit. But basically, for people who don't have that background, what it means is we're basically smoothing over our data to make it, to basically show these general trend lines. So as you can see, automotive is really hard hit and medical devices isn't so hard hit at all. There's reasons for this, which I'll go into momentarily. But really what we see is we see 3 chapters, as I mentioned before, mid-January to mid-April, mid-April to June 30th, and June 30th present. So what we're going to do is for each one of these chapters, we're going to refit that lowest line for just that chapter's worth of data. So what's chapter 1? Utilization takes the stairs up and the elevator down. You see this pattern in a lot of other places like stocks. It takes a long time for stocks to get their footing and feel confident, and a lot of things have to go right for the stock market to slowly creep up, but it doesn't take much for it to crash, as we saw this year and in previous other years as well. Same thing goes for utilization. What we actually saw is on February 7th, we were about to set 18-month highs. All of our industries that we tracked were humming along and either slightly flat, a little bit up, or frankly increasing quite significantly like automotive. Unfortunately, we know that this can't last forever. On March 7th, COVID shutdowns began. Automotive is hit first and hardest is what we see. Some customers try and retool. Medical device manufacturing, unsurprisingly, continues to hum along pretty well and actually claims the highest utilization when they're usually in 2nd or 3rd place. Automotive customers try and retool, but it's not enough, frankly. By April 15th, what we see is for automotive and for aerospace and defense, a lot of these tier 1, tier 2 manufacturers, they're hit the hardest and they really get screwed down the supply chain. We see about a 40% decline in utilization, which is really quite incredible if you think about it. They're operating at almost half of the capacity that they were before. So what's happening from mid-April to June 30th? An uneven recovery. As you guys can recall during this time, we were kind of going back and forth with shutdowns, a lot of discussion about what we should do, a lot of back and forth, and same thing is happening in the manufacturing market. Medical device manufacturing industry actually stops their decline on May 1st, and it's going up, interestingly enough. It continues to accelerate, and you can see this widening the gap between all the other industries. You can see these other industries, contract manufacturing, industrial machinery, they're kind of oscillating up and down, trying to find their footing during this time. On June 18th, automotive, it's not doing too well. It actually decreases to 3rd place, almost to 4th. And what I noticed during this time is that automotive manufacturers, their incentives for buying new cars are at all-time highs. You could get $11,000, $12,000 off on your vehicle because these guys are really desperate to get some consumer demand moving for these things. And this oscillates all the way down the supply chain. From June 30th to now, what we see is automotive is slowly creeping up. I heard that this summer people are actually starting to buy cars again. briefly gets first place again, but goes back down. Medical manufacturing continues to accelerate, interestingly enough. I suspect that this is because there's a lot of big contracts out there still for ventilator production and other medical equipment manufacturing. And so we're still seeing the effects of that. And by August 7th, utilization is mostly flatlined. We're in a wait and see mode, and it's frankly very strongly dependent on policy decisions at this time. Are we going to shut down again? We know what the effect of that's going to be. Or are we going to stay open and try kind of a hybrid approach to things? So now this is a really interesting time, and I think we're kind of at an inflection point here. Going to the fall when flu season's upon us, and college campuses are opening and closing. There's a lot going on, and I think that's what policymakers and also manufacturers are kind of waiting for. So I just want to share some interesting phenomenon here. These weren't requested by people, but these are just things that we would kind of find to be cool. So we're working with some federal agencies right now, and they have these COVID risk groupings. So group 1 is New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. These are often the strictest shutdowns, strongest regulations, things like that. Group 2 is Arizona, Arkansas, Alabama, Texas, these sorts of states. Maybe not so strict on the regulations. And then group 3 is just every other state plus DC. So what we see, interestingly enough, is we can see evidence of staggered shifts, but only in certain regions. So what we did was we normalized utilization by hour to look at what the distribution of utilization is. So this is midnight to midnight. And what we see is for New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, at the beginning of this pandemic in January, February, March, they pretty much only operated on business hours. But as time goes on, you can see they're employing workers now during the wee hours of the night because they're trying to space everybody out. And not so for some of these other states. Arizona, Arkansas, Alabama, Kansas, Kentucky, these other states, they see surprisingly little, I guess, evidence of staggered shifts. They are basically operating the way they always have been. They kind of see the most activity between 10 and 4 o'clock. That's first, second shift, I think, and not so much the other hours. So it's amazing how different these regions are responding. And it's also amazing that we can kind of see this in our data. I just think it's cool. We also see that consequences of policy decisions are immediately visible in our data. If we look again at New York, New Jersey, Connecticut versus these other states, you can see that on March 9th, we're actually seeing strong performance. A lot of orders that usually went overseas were coming to these to the U.S., especially to the Northeast. But on March 16th, there's actually an executive order by the state governors of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, and that tri-state area actually shuts down all essential commercial activity, not just manufacturing, but everything, pretty much. And you can see that in our data. You can see that all the other states are pretty much humming along, but for New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, we see an immediate decrease of about 50% normalized utilization. It's about a ratio of 40% as compared to 80% relatively speaking from before. And on March 21st, I find this pretty amazing. Weekend activity completely disappears. It's zero. No shops are open that we track during the weekend after COVID shutdowns in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. So it just goes to show that we can kind of quantify these sorts of effects. And, it's really important as we go into the fall to be able to do this, because I think the way policy is usually set is by looking at things like this, and everything's a trade-off. And is it, kind of worthwhile to do this for, reducing infections? Is it not worthwhile? I know that various other government organizations do these sorts of, cost-benefit analysis for regulation. And, we see that because government institutions are contacting us right now, there's more of a desire to do this rather than just, like a hard, stoppage or a hard, we're not going to do anything. There's a more nuanced approach involved that's possible. And if we look at this without the individual day level data, you can really see that decline. That blue line right there is New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. It really crashes, and the other states only slightly go down during this during the mid to late March period. So again, use cases, anecdotes from users. We've had people come to us and be like, yeah, your data helps us make decisions about how we should plan our sales. People who sell raw materials into machine shops, if they know that their end customers only have a 17% decline and, not 60, 70, 80%, like, some other sources who maybe not are as rigorous are claiming, then they can do a better job of planning their sales. Again, alternative source of economic benchmarking. We are really seeing this pick up now. What we actually see is that, federal agencies who we are, starting to enter into contracts with are actually finding our data useful for basically rapid assessment of policy decisions. If we shut down these states, what's the effect on businesses there? So, it's not just this simple program here. It's not like a reopening is going to cause the economy to go up or cases to go up, and it's not like a shutdown is going to cause the economy to go down and cases to also go down. It's really a more nuanced approach, and I think going into the fall with all the volatility that we're about to see, these sorts of tools are going to be ever more important. So that's it for my part, and I'll hand it back to Graham for the next presenter. Thank you.
Wow, that was great, Lou. I won't take any time in between these. We'll just dive right back into the data with Chad. Chad, take it away from here.
So great, Lou, that was fascinating as always. So I'm going to share my slides. Hopefully everyone can see that. And I think a little bit of an update on what we did. I think in the late June, we did a similar set of presentations. So there's a little bit of new numbers here. Again, I'll encourage, if you don't follow me on Twitter, to do so. There's my email or Twitter at the bottom, @ChadMoutre. I'm pretty active on there regularly, and you can also look at my Monday report if you're not an NAM member by looking at that. So I'm going to start here with the NAM Manufacturers Outlook Survey. We actually have this survey in the field right now, so I'll have a lot more to say about it in the coming weeks. Obviously, optimism and overall outlook fell to the lowest level since the Great Recession in May. Little preview, it obviously is coming up, and some of the preliminary data I'm seeing for the third quarter, but I'll save that for when we actually release it. And as I noted last time, last year we saw quite a bit with the trade war and slowing global growth. Lou mentioned earlier that things were actually getting a little bit better before it got worse, right? So we actually did see an uptick in January and February before COVID hit, and we fell to 33.9% optimism here in terms of the overall outlook. I used to be chief economist at the Small Business Administration, so I almost always look at this data by firm size. Larger manufacturers have tended to be the most pessimistic really over the last 2 years, largely because they're more engaged globally, right? So the trade war affected them more. And I think even more recently, those supply chain networks also have been impacted pretty severely. So you've seen larger members actually citing bigger challenges there in general. And when you turn it over to the ISM data, and I'll use this chart really to kind of begin the conversation of where we've come really since the last webinar we did here with Machine Metrics and Plex. We've seen, obviously optimism, the overall outlook fell to the lowest level since the Great Recession in April. Severe declines in overall activity, as Lou described earlier. But we've seen a bit of a rebound. The overall trend line has moved in the right direction since then. And when you're looking at the June and July data, overall manufacturing activity has picked up, again, moving in the right direction. Look at the July ISM data. over 60 in terms of the overall index reading, which suggests that demand and output were growing very strongly. The only laggard in that case was employment. And you see this really in all the sentiment data around the world. You've seen a nice rebound in the overall figures, and I'll show you some of those global figures in a second. But don't let that fool you. The reality is, yes, we're moving in the right direction, but we still have a long way to go to get back to where we were pre-pandemic. And I think I'm on record as saying I don't think we're going to get back to our pre-recessionary levels of output or GDP until at least 2022, maybe the end of 2021. And the next couple charts will show you really where some of that pain is, and very similar actually to some of Lou's analysis earlier. So you see these tremendous declines in activity in March and April. Again, off the charts in terms of these numbers relative to what we've seen in the past. We have had 3 months of pretty solid gains in manufacturing production, May, June, and July, again, as activity started coming back online. The biggest declines were in the durable goods space, and the biggest increases more recently have been in the durable goods space. And I'm going to get into that in a second and what sectors those are. When you look at really where we're digging out of this hole, and these slides are going to be available, all of them, so don't feel like you have to take a lot of notes here. You can certainly go and peruse them at your disposal. But this shows you overall manufacturing production over the last few years. And you can see that we still, even with the increases in manufacturing output over the last 3 months, we're still 8% below where we were in February. So again, a long way to go to get us out of that hole, although we've made a nice dent in it so far. So the next few charts, I'm going to walk through all the 19 major sectors here. So this is looking just at July, right? So of the 19 major sectors, 17 of them had increased production in the month of July. Motor vehicles is at the top of the list. You're going to see them at the top of the list in many of these cases, keeping in mind that motor vehicle production really came to a screeching halt for many weeks in the spring months. So you had tremendous declines in activity, and then you've seen a huge rebound in the last few months. But you can see other sectors up here as well that have had really decent rebounds in the month of July, with really only fabricated metal products and paper having declines in that particular month. When you're looking at it on a year-over-year basis, still some pretty, look at the declines here on a year-over-year basis in some of these sectors. There's only one sector, that's computer and electronic products, that has seen a positive year-over-year growth. And I don't have to explain to you why that's the case, especially given that we are all virtual for this conference, for this overall meeting. So, clearly that sector is continuing to benefit from the kind of the changes we're seeing overall. I'm writing a journal article. Actually, I'm trying to finish it up this week, looking at manufacturing and how it's rebounded and where we see it going moving forward. So the next couple charts are going to kind of be taken actually from that. So this particular, I've actually lumped the 19 major sectors into 3 different groupings. Largest, middle, and kind of the sectors that were the least impacted. So here are the top 7, right? So if you're looking at the sectors that had the biggest declines between February and April, that's peak to trough. Look at motor vehicle and parts here, down 83.1% over those 2 months. Apparel, printing, you can go down the list here. These are tremendous declines, but you can also see some of the rebounds. Again, the most noticeable here is motor vehicle and parts, which essentially has bounced back to almost where it was in terms of production pre-pandemic. Now, I'm going to put a little bit of a caveat there because overall sales have not bounced back, right? So I do have a little bit of a question mark after that, but still, it is a nice, handsome rebound there. When you're looking at the second grouping of companies, so this is the middle group, roughly 15 to 24-ish% decline between February and April. Again, not a lot of standouts there in terms of storyline, but you can see the decline followed by a nice healthy rebound. And then lastly, these are the 5 sectors that were the least impacted between February and April. And note that all of them had declines over that time frame. Just some had less declines than others. Electrical equipment, food, chemicals, computers, and paper. The trend line here that I think is interesting is that computer and electronic products green line here. notice that it was growing pretty substantially beforehand, and really that trend line is expected to continue to move forward pretty aggressively. So I do think it's interesting. You can't just paint manufacturing kind of monolithically. There's a lot of changes there. While overall manufacturing production fell 20.1% or 20.2, depending on which measure you're looking at over that 2-month period, there's a lot of variation in that figure. In terms of overall capital spending in the U.S. economy, in terms of for manufacturing, you can see again the huge increase we had in capital spending between 2016 and maybe the beginning of 2019. Last year was relatively flat in terms of capital goods spending. Maybe actually as you got towards the end of the year, it was falling. And then you have here the more recent pandemic effects that have been pretty profound. Hopefully that number comes back, given that capital spending is pretty important for the manufacturing economy. On the global basis, and I mentioned this earlier, very similar trends to what we're seeing in the US, right? So these are the top 10 markets for US manufactured goods in order, right? The good news here, the global manufacturing PMI number, that 50.3 that you see at the bottom, that was the first positive reading, in other words, more than 50, since January. So the trend line here is moving in the right direction. We have 6 economies that were expanding in July. That's up from 4 in June, and just 1, which was China, in May. So again, the trend line here is an encouraging one. All 10 of these economies actually had stronger PMI readings in July than in June, and that's true even for poor Mexico, which has the lowest reading up here. The comment I would make about this, though, is yes, much like the US and all of the sentiment data I showed you earlier, the trend line is moving in the right direction, but they still have a long way to go here. Looking at the overall industrial production data, we're well below pre-pandemic levels in terms of, whether looking at it February to current or we're looking at it year over year, those numbers are well below what we would like to see. The exception to that might be China, which is experiencing positive year-over-year growth rates, but still even that number is below where it was, say, in December. So, and in China, you're still seeing retail sales and fixed asset investment, which is negative on a year-over-year basis. And so there's still a number of challenges for us to kind of get through. I'm going to throw this one in here. This also comes from my journal article, just because the previous chart is just showing you a static view of what's happening in terms of manufacturing sentiment. I like this one. This is a candlestick chart, which if you trade stocks, you're used to seeing candlesticks charts. This shows you a little bit more volatility over the last 7 months. And so the straight line here is showing you the high and low over that 7-month period from January to July. So again, look, some of these PMI numbers got down into the low 30s. At one point, at its lowest point during the COVID-19 recession. But as you see, they bounced back pretty handsomely. If it's red, it means that the PMI number in July is lower than it was in January, and the reverse is true if it's green. It means that the PMI in July is higher than it was in January. And we're seeing a lot more green on this chart than we were in the June version of it. So again, some encouraging trends there, but you can again see just how much change we've seen in that sector overall. And I'm going to bounce over to employment just because I want to make sure we get to that before I turn it over to Jerry. Much like with the production data, we lost 1.3 million workers in manufacturing in the month of April. And we've had 3 straight months here where we've had some pretty decent gains, especially in May and June as those furloughed workers started coming back. But even with those increases, we're still down around 740,000 workers in the sector. I think we're going to continue to see growth over the remainder of this year, probably adding another 300 workers to what we've already added. But that still keeps us down around 400 or so from where we were in February. So still progress, but again, we're not back to kind of those pre-recessionary peaks. In terms of the sectors, just kind of walking through those, just like I did with production. Again, a little bit of a mixed bag in July. You had some stronger activity, obviously, in transportation equipment. That was primarily motor vehicles. Miscellaneous durable goods, it doesn't necessarily ring a bell to you, but that's predominantly, as Lou pointed out earlier, medical equipment. is in that category. So that's why you're seeing such a strong figure there. But you also had some sectors which in general have fared a little bit better in recent months, actually had a little bit weaker data in July. When you're looking at it, again, February to July, all 19 major sectors still are down in terms of employment relative to where they were in February. Again, led primarily by transportation equipment. That's primarily motor vehicles, but also aerospace. And the rest of the sectors you can see up there, again, pretty much mirroring the production data, which you would expect. I'm going to flash forward several graphs here just because I can get to some of those others in the Q&A. We are going to be getting a new GDP number on Thursday, just basically revising that 32.9 figure that's up there for the second quarter. I don't expect it to change a whole heck of a lot from where it was, you know, a percentage point here or there relative to that figure. Still the worst number we've ever had, or at least since the Great Depression. For the third quarter, you know, I have an 18 handle up here. The consensus is over 20. It's going to be a very large number either way. Again, the largest on record. And so that's a nice healthy bump up. I think pushing back, and the reason why I have 18 instead of something a little bit larger than that is we have seen a little bit more weakness in the third quarter than we would have expected, given some continued hesitation on the spending side, the lingering COVID challenges that are out there, et cetera. So that might end up making that number a little bit lower than it might have been otherwise. Still, again, a phenomenal number. And I have, you know, the fourth quarter numbers are all over the place in terms of forecasts. I think as we get closer to the fourth quarter, we'll be able to finesse that number a little bit more. There's a lot of uncertainty out there about what's going to happen with the virus. What will happen if we don't have a vaccine sooner or later, right? There's still, so those uncertainties, I think, are really causing a lot of economists to have a very wide variance for fourth quarter growth. I have 3.5 up there right now. Even with that, we're down roughly 4.6 this year, up 3.5 next year. And I have manufacturing production down 8% this year and up roughly 4 next year. Again, a lot of uncertainty in those numbers, but still a sign that we're moving in the right direction. And I'm running out of time, so I'm going to just go ahead and put this slide up there and turn it over to Jerry, so he has plenty of time to speak. So,
take it away, Jerry. No intro needed from me. Last but definitely not least.
All right, thank you so much, you guys. Let's see here. All right, everyone see my screen, right? All right. So thank you so much, Graham and Gwen and Machine Metrics for putting this together and to add a little fantastic insight. That's some great stuff that you showed. Good stuff. So who am I? My name is Jerry Foster. I am the CTO and co-founder at Plex. I've been involved in manufacturing my entire career. I just love exploring the intersection between manufacturing and technology. I love leadership and culture and how all those things come together to make a very effective and efficient company. And so who is Plex? The company that I helped co-found about 25 years ago. We are the smart manufacturing platform. We connect people and systems and machines and supply chains and track all of that data and automate those processes and bring them all together for visibility and quality and control. And we are a true multi-tenant SaaS application built in the cloud from the ground up. And we have a very high renewal rate, very high uptime because of our experience in the cloud. We have about 670 customers in about 29 countries around the world, 30 if you include California. We do about 8 billion transactions every day. We record 8 billion transactions across all of our product line. And a transaction in this case would be any single particular piece of work, such as receiving material or making a production record or sending out a shipment. Each of those is a transaction. So we record about 8 billion transactions every day and record all those transactions in the cloud from all of our customers. So whatever you want to do and whatever you want to make, we can help you make it smarter. And because we're cloud-based in the nature of our product, we have the ability to scale. Our customers range from mom and pop size operations to multinational enterprise scale companies. So what have we done? What is it that we have done that made us relevant to this particular conversation? As I said, we are completely cloud-based. And because of that, we have access to literally 20 years of hardcore manufacturing data that's been accumulated from our customers. Not only is that 20 years, but it's we're accumulating that data every day, every minute, every second. So we can get a great picture of what's happening across the industry, across the world, across our customers at any point in time. So back in March, we launched the COVID-19 Resource Center as a response to the uncertainty that was being generated by the coronavirus. We wanted to contribute and help our customers and manufacturers and analysts and the press to see what was actually happening around the world and in their particular area, so they could make decisions and they could have some insight into what was going on. So if you think back to part one of this presentation, part one that we did back in June, I showed a large number of graphs and data points about what was happening from our customers' perspective. Again, this is data that we are collecting from our customers. And we really focused on this concept of production. And what we mean by production is every time one of our customers fills up a container or a bin or a box or a pallet, every time that fills up with parts and then gets moved, they record a production record. And that production record tells what the part was and how many pieces were in that container and who did it and the time of the day and all that relevant information. But we wanted to make sure we found a metric that normalized all of that data across all of our customers, across all of the industries. So we actually fell on this concept of a production record. Not what was in it, not how many pieces, because that would vary greatly across all of our customers, but the actual creation of a production record. So that count of production records is what we've been measuring as far as the COVID-19 Resource Center that I referred to earlier. And this is the graph that I showed back in June when we had the part one of the seminar. And here we can see that there was an 82% drop for North American production when March, at the beginning of March when COVID-19 hit. That's an incredible drop. We've never seen anything like that in manufacturing my entire career, never seen anything like that before. And then we spent a few weeks at the bottom, and then there was a recovery back to about 70% of the original production in the 6 weeks that followed that trough at the bottom. And this is where we were when we left off last time. So the question is, did this recovery hold up? Is it continuing to go up? Has it leveled off? So let's find out. So this is what's happened since that time. The upward trend definitely is continuing for the data that we are collecting from our customers. Now it has leveled off somewhat since then. The slope is a little bit more flat than it was before, but it's still going up strongly up and to the right. Now the dips you see here correlate to holidays such as July 4th and Canada Day, along with that normal mid to late summer holiday that is common to many manufacturers. But what's really interesting is when you look at this right here with our most recent data that we got as of yesterday morning, we have actually hit 100% of our pre-pandemic levels with productions. Now, to be honest, that's the marketing number. The engineering number was 99.6. So we were almost there. We rounded up a little bit. For all intents and purposes, it's 100%. I expect next week, as we collect data from this week, we'll actually cross that threshold. But 99.6, effectively 100%, which is amazing. And from our perspective and from our customers' perspective, it's a reason for cautious optimism. Now we can break this down by state and by country and whatnot. When we look at the state data, we actually have found that the slope and shape of this graph is very similar across most of the states. As far as Plex customers are concerned, regardless of where they are in their recovery or their particular climate, political climate. And I think that's because manufacturing overall is extremely resilient. Manufacturers spend their life overcoming problems. And this one's been a doozy, but it's been very, very cool watching our customers respond and figuring out how to get product out the door in spite of all the restrictions and difficulties that they're encountering every single day. The other interesting thing is when we take that exact same graph that I just showed you, which is blue here, and put that against last year's data, which is orange. So we're comparing 2020 against the same time period in 2019. And we're starting to see in the last couple months a very similar pattern to 2019. So we're starting to normalize across what we would expect in years past. Now you do see a little bit of, in the last few weeks, we do see a little divergence with 2020 as most of our customers are starting to ramp up production in order to get back to normal. So that's North American production. Now let's take a look at China, which I think has some interesting ramifications for North America. So when we looked last at China, we saw that after a huge initial recovery period, they kind of plateaued and they were stalled at about 50% of their pre-COVID production. So where are they now? So looking at the data now, It's a little bit better, but still not great. Their recovery has been very bumpy and very erratic as they have had to deal with repeated outbreaks. And they're still hovering there less than 65%, about 64% of their original pre-pandemic production numbers. Now they are doing better, as you can see. The average line there between the last couple months and the 2 months previous is about 18% higher. So they are doing a little bit better. But that begs the question, knowing that before the crisis, China was a huge part of the supply chain, being the originating source for so much material and parts, you might be wondering, hey, Jerry, if North American production is nearly back to 100%, like you showed a minute ago, but China is still below 65%, what's happened to the supply chain? Where are all those parts and material coming from, if not from China? Now, we know from multiple industry sources, including our own customers, that they're purposely reevaluating their dependencies, they're reshoring, they're considering nearshoring, and diversifying so they're not single sourced. And we have found, based on our data, that Mexico actually might be the beneficiary of some of that business. In fact, from what we see, Mexico is the first country to actually surpass their pre-COVID-19 levels as of yesterday. They're at 103% of where they were before the pandemic. Now, what's really interesting is if we want to superimpose the daily COVID-19 cases on top of their production. Now, this data that I'm going to show you right here comes from the Johns Hopkins COVID-19 data that we're all so familiar with. But this is fascinating to me. It shows that even while their COVID-19 cases were increasing, production overall in Mexico was still increasing at the same time. Now, there's a small dip right here in late June and early July that would suggest and would correlate with some of the local shutdowns trying to contain the virus. But overall, the production in Mexico continued to increase through that time. And again, I just think it speaks to the fact that manufacturers are tough, and this industry, although it's taken quite a hit to the jaw, is durable. Now let's take a look at North America and compare that to the two other industrial continents, Europe and Asia. How are they faring against each other? Now we have different number of customers in each of those continents, so we thought for a little bit on how do we normalize the data between those continents so that we can accurately compare them to each other. And so what this graph does is it plots on a weekly basis the percentage of their production compared to their pre-COVID-19 levels. So what we did is we took the pre-COVID-19 number, the highest number for their pre-COVID-19 data, and used that as the barometer. As you can see here, for China, their high point that we used for this graph was on January 12th. And for Europe and North America, it was March 8th. And so we grabbed those two numbers, and then all the other points on this graph is a percentage of those two numbers. So now we can superimpose all those continents on top, the data from those continents on top of each other, and get a normalized view of how the continents are faring overall and against each other. And we can plot that recovery. And so what we see here is that the crisis first hit Europe and North America about 2 months after it hit China, and actually hit Europe about a week before North America. And then there was a recovery that we've already talked about, but Europe was ahead of North America for a number of weeks until this very interesting point here in early June. It's the first week of June, both Europe and North America surpassed China's recovery, which is on a downward trend that you can see there. But at the same time, North America catches and passes Europe at the exact same time. Now, this has actually happened in early June, so it was before the part one of this seminar that we had back in late June, but we had not built this particular visualization at that time. So when I built this visualization for this particular webinar, I saw that. I was like, oh, that's really cool to see how those three converge at that exact point in June. Now, of course, we see the black dip there at the end where Europe has taken their August vacations. Well, silly Europeans, we're not going to let a pandemic get in the way of a couple of weeks at the beach, and now they're starting to recover. And it'll be interesting to see how far they recover, and if there's been any pent up demand due to their August vacations and their time off. So we'll plot that over the next couple of weeks and see how they bounce back. Now, taking a look at not necessarily employment, but logins, we track every time someone logs into one of our systems. We record that as a login count. Now, there's not a direct one-to-one correlation between the number of logins and the number of employees, because an employee can log in multiple times per day. But what we have found is the percentages are proportional, so that if we compare logins between two different time periods and notice a difference, the number of active employees will usually vary by that same percentage. So we can make some correlations and assumptions based on the login count. Now, as Chad already said, and we know, we're seeing record unemployment in the United States. And the IHS data and ISM data is reporting that hiring is not keeping pace with production, likely because manufacturers don't know how long this catch-up period is going to last, and they're not quite sure. But for Plex customers, the employment numbers are getting close to their pre-COVID levels as well. In fact, the logins are at 95% of our pre-COVID levels. And anecdotally, in discussions with our customers, many of them are bringing back their furloughed employees. They're actively recruiting new hires. And for the ones that are a little unsure and want to hedge their bets, they've been going to temp agencies to get those workers and those bodies into the plant to try to catch up on their production until they're sure that the market has stabilized. Last piece of data we'll talk about is automotive. Now, again, with the amount of data that we collect, we could slice and dice across all different industries and regions and locales. And Plex supports manufacturers from multiple industries, but we are particularly strong in automotive. And so this is a view into automotive production. And so what you're seeing here is actually a comparison between the average weekly production, the first 2.5 months of this year, with their production as of April 27th. So each orange-blue pair is a single customer comparing their average production pre-pandemic and their production as of April 27th. Now, I just grabbed this slice out of a much bigger graph that showed all of our customers, and it was so big and there were so many, it was hard to see. So I grabbed a representative slice that you can get a good idea of what we're seeing here. And what you can see is in April, there's hardly any production happening across our automotive customers. Now, there is some of our automotive customers, and we're supporting essential industries like trucking, and some of them pivoted to do PPE. So there is some production. But then when we looked at it again in June, we saw some good news. We saw many companies were close to their pre-COVID production, or at least had gotten a good start. But then the data that we collected yesterday, which shows last week, shows that the majority of our customers are running higher than their pre-COVID-19 production, which is fantastic. Some of them significantly so, as you can see. So this is really good news for the industry, for our customers, and watching them come back. Now, this correlates with what we're hearing from our customers. We had one of our customers last week indicated that they expect their near-term production rates to be higher than 100% of pre-pandemic levels for several months while they catch up with their backlogs and their back orders. But then they expect that to settle at less than 100% of the pre-pandemic levels for the midterm until the economy fully stabilizes and normalizes. So that's just a real quick view of some of the data that we've been collecting across our industries and across North America production. So I hope it's been useful and interesting for you. And I will send it back to headquarters.
Wow, that was amazing. 3 just like kind of breathtaking, remarkable presentations back to back to back. I hope you guys could all ingest all that data as quickly as I could. It was pretty amazing. I will say this, first of all, we're at the top of the hour. We've got, almost over 150 people still here. We do really appreciate you guys, joining us for this amazing webinar. Given, the sensitivity to, the time of our presenters, I know that we did have a number of questions come in. So what I will do is I will distribute the list of questions out to our presenters so we can pull together some answers for you and send that out in our follow-up email to the webinar with the recording. So not that I wouldn't love to keep everybody around for another half hour, because this one always is really, really interesting, but I think that's how we're going to play it. So I do really thank everybody for their presentations today. Again, our objective is to bring companies together and really for the benefit of the industry. So thank you again to Jerry, to Lou, and to Chad for their time. And we're hoping to make this a bit of a regular thing. So keep your eyes open, and perhaps we'll recreate this in a month or two when we have some new data to share. So thanks again, and we'll see you all at the next webinar.
Thank you.